like whoever is there, right? No problems
Yeah,
about. I don't
no
need to look
problem.
into the camera like this.
Yeah, we're already live, so we can just have ask the viewers tell us if Gotham is looking in the right direction. Okay, everybody, welcome to the Sunday Club. Delighted to be back after a little bit of a break. And we're here with a very interesting panel, slightly different. You may have spotted a new face amongst us. I'd like to introduce you to Gotham. Of course, you all know him on Twitter, has a huge following, is a prolific writer, is also with ORF, the vice president, I believe, there, and an expert on geopolitics. And what did I say, Gotham? It's already happening. So we are exactly 40 seconds into the show. So AIM is coming. AIM is coming. He's coming on time. Don't worry. I mean, he's not coming on time, but he's coming. So is Suhail. Pallavi, unfortunately, cannot be here today because of personal reasons. But let's just dive right into our conversation, and let's start with our debut guest, Gotham. Uh, Prime Minister Modi's visit to the United States. We were all watching it very keenly. I would like to know from you what you made of the visit. What are your key takeaways? And I think that'll set the ball rolling on the discussion.
Okay, so what I found was that I was racing against him. He was delivering stuff, the India-US deals and so on, much faster than what I could pace. And by the time I finished one article, he had moved on to the next. And by the time I finished the second one, there was a third thing going on. So I think the pace has been fantastic. It's been a very well-planned trip. And but and we will get to the details as we go deeper into the show. But
Mm-hmm.
for me, this is a work in progress in terms of the India-US relations. And I think till the late 1980s, maybe even till 1990, our relationship was not very good. In the 70s, the Janata Party had thrown out and very proudly celebrated the exit of Coca-Cola and IBM, among other companies. Before that, I think US had chosen Pakistan as its ally and had supported Pakistan against India in the Bangladesh war. It has been consistently and constantly and almost unrelentingly supporting Pakistan with arms, aid, cash, and strategic cover
And
against
constantly,
India.
almost unrelentingly.
In 1991,
Arms, aid,
I see a change
and
in the
strategic.
relationship in 1991. It was driven by economics because of Prime Minister Narasimha Rao bringing in the Statement on Industrial Policy 1991, which opened the economy, liberalized our economy, allowed investments to come in, increased trade. It's not that overnight everything got opened out, but the door was opened in 1991 with that policy. I think the economic part, the economic pillars of the India-US relationship began to get built from 1991 onwards. Of course, there were many companies before that as well, but I think this was the door that opened opportunities for US capital to enter in a big way, and it has been entering in a big way since then. In 1998, Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee tested the nuclear bombs, and we were sanctioned against. And but that was a short blip. In 2005, Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, through a lot of up and down, and even at the cost of losing his government, losing his prime ministership, ensured that we signed the civil nuclear deal with America, which again is a big thing, but it's not so big as to say that after the deal was signed, nuclear plants made in America began to proliferate in India. No, but these are all signals. So in 2005, what Prime Minister Manmohan Singh ji did was to consolidate an economic relationship and introduce a strategic element into it. So the two began to work together. After that, it has been going up all the way. I think trade has increased. India has become a $3 trillion economy, going on 5 and 7, and the third largest within this decade, and it'll cross 30 or 40 trillion by the middle of this century. So keeping all those in mind, now I see that the economic pillar and the strategic pillar are now coming together. You can say that China has caused the strategic handshake much faster, and I would agree. But China is not the only reason. I think India has, on its own, continuously been seeing how the relationship has been strengthening despite all voices to the contrary. In fact, and we can discuss this later on, I feel that the G to G relationship, that is government to government relationship between India and the US, has been on an even keel largely. The B2B, which is company to companies coming in, recently we saw Apple, before that there are several others, uh, has been on an upswing. The trade has been on an upswing. Where we lack is academia and the media, but that's okay. That's what democracy is all about. So that's how I see this relationship, and as a work in progress, Prime Minister Modi has taken the baton running. Yeah, he has made the best of what he could with the previous administration and now with the current dispensation. And it's likely that it will continue. Even after Prime Minister Modi goes, the next Prime Minister, irrespective of his ideological inclinations, I mean, you got to be really stupid to and shoot yourself in the foot to break this momentum. So I see this as a work in progress that is continuing, and this particular visit has taken it that much further.
Would it be fair to say it's probably at the best point that it's ever been in the history of these two countries and their interactions? Or is that an overstatement?
No, it's not an overstatement. It is the best point. But you see, in 1991, we were a $230 billion economy. And whatever trade then there was, you have to see it in that perspective. Today, as a 3.3 trillion or 3.7, whichever exchange rate you decide to use, the scale has increased. The threat has increased, and therefore the engagement between the two countries has increased. So yeah, technically you are right, this is the best that we have had so far in the past 75 years. But I see it again, to come back to my main point, as a momentum. Earlier India was a fringe player. Even till 2014, India was the 10th largest economy. Before that, it was the 17th largest economy. So there wasn't much to gain from India in terms of economics, given that strategically the US was more working with Pakistan, and in the last 2 decades, more with China. In fact, I would say, I would argue that the rise of China, I mean, US has contributed to its own demise by ensuring the rise of China. It is stupid. It is the biggest strategy. It's the biggest strategic failure of the US. Having said that, I think US is quick to learn, quick to change. It's nimble-footed, and now we are seeing India. If you examine India from the map, suddenly the physical geography has moved from land to water. And if you see the Indo-Pacific region, India is a huge player out there. So I think the Quad, the economics, the strategic, the drones, the aircraft engine manufacturing for the Air Force, etc. All these are little components that you will see rising even as we talk, over the next 1 year, maybe even more, and going forward as part of that continuum that I keep referring to.
Okay, thanks so much for that, for those opening comments. I think they really set the context for the discussion that we want to have, and the tone as well. So I'm very grateful to you. And Sandeep Ghosh, coming to you, I'm very curious to know your perspective. The middle class in India, of course, is if you look at it from the public lens, is mostly pro-American. So there wouldn't be any kind of backlash or anything as ties deepen with the United States, unlike some other countries when there are attempts to build bridges with them. There's severe backlash from the public. But in this case, we will not encounter that. What do you think is the way forward for these two great democracies to collaborate on? How can India do it without being partisan or non-aligned, which is usually what we have done in the past? Is that going to change? How do you view this?
Thanks, Advaita, for having me over and then giving me the number two slot to speak. That's a that's a
Self
you know,
pitying has started. Yes, yes.
that's a rarity. But taking on from what Gautam was saying, first of all, and the question you asked him, I do think this is the sweet spot, because the sweet spot is economically and politically it is so aligned, and the cross section intersection which has happened today, that makes this moment so special. Now, what Gautam is saying, whether it would have happened with any other, government or any other leader in place, that's a counterfactual question. Broadly, I think directionally it would have happened, but I think to some extent Modi has seized the moment, and not just today. This has been building up from day one of his coming to power, despite the kind of pushback reservations he had from America um, while becoming prime minister. But all these things with Gautam mentioned about the sea, the Quad, the Indo-Pacific, all this has been very systematically, the building blocks have been put in place one after the other, and we have maneuvered through various both opportunities and crises to make us to that extent, I wouldn't call indispensable, but important enough, by which, despite all the noise and clamor within his own party and Obama talking, Biden had to give Modi that kind of a reception and that kind of prominence. Nobody, has an illusion. The Americans only know their interests best. They don't have any permanent friends or enemies. So they will do what is right for them. But to be perceived, that we are right for them, and perceived that we are right to the extent that they will ward off some domestic criticism to embrace India, or even the earlier standoffs regarding buying oil from Russia and India's stand during the Ukraine war. And some of it, people have commented now, there was not even a reference to India's position that in Ukraine war throughout this trip. So all these, I think, add to a certain political heft or geopolitical heft for India. And I am not too sure, Gautam, if there is a change of, again, hypothetically, if there is a change of regime, without, say, a party change happening, whether that, the sort of a front foot forward, take forward sort of a stance of playing the geopolitical game will continue. This is what Modi and Jaishankar has done in tandem, very visibly, and I think in a very systematic manner. And they've come to a certain stage which we saw today. Now, what does that raise? There are two issues. What is this whole criticism and discomfort we saw both from the constituents in India and within America? I think if it was purely the economic issue, you would not have faced so much of pushback or all this criticism. It is happening because they are seeing not only is India's stock rising, but Modi is also trying to raise his stock vis-a-vis the US, and especially when people are trying to use the US for very obvious or kind of a regime change thing, he is making personally himself indispensable or important for US, because they know, as I said somewhere, like earlier he used to say in India, Modi hai to mumkin hai. It is internationally, if they have to be, goods have to be delivered, it is Modi hai to mumkin hai. Without Modi to be able to move the Indian polity to deliver all these goods, what America needs would be difficult. And I think Americans are sharp enough to realize that. Last point is, Advaita, coming back to what you're talking about, the common people. Certainly, we are gone past those red days of communism, when people would have said, like in my city, where the U.S. consulate is, it was renamed Ho Chi Minh Sarani, as a a snub to the American embassy or the consulate for the Vietnam War. That has changed. We have become unapologetically much more of a consumerist society. People are looking for, they realize that we need development, industrial technology, and whatever we have gained through the IT and other segment, there is a direct linkage to the US. Today, people are not even going to Russia for education, which people used to do once upon a time. So the Russian, that image has broken totally. So I don't think you will face any of that. But politically, how it is translated, so therefore, some of the investments or this defense cooperation and all that is fine, and that's music to the ears of the Americans because that will create jobs there. But how it translates at the Indian end, whether it's the automobile industry coming or the China too, which people are talking about, I think that's what is going to determine the public sentiment. And that is where the balancing has to be done. Otherwise, you'll hear that Modi jaake wahan pe he sold off India and came back. Ultimately, we are not getting jobs. We are not getting, and the disparity between haves and have-nots are increasing. So you'll get into that rhetoric. Thanks, Sarveda.
You're welcome, Sandeep. Now on to this has been the most civil we've ever been. Thank you, Gautam.
But the other person, how do you wake him up? He is in a.
Oh, Abhijit, yes, it's your turn now since we are all being so good today. And Suhail is in London in a no network area, but when he's in network, he'll join us. But coming to Abhijit, your views on initial views on Prime Minister Modi's visit to the United States.
Look, all up very, very good. There'll be ups and downs with every visit, okay? You can't worry about it. If you remember when Manmohan Singh, I think the previous consequential visit was Manmohan Singh's visit for the nuclear deal in 2007 or 8, I think it was. I think people have forgotten how vitriolic the nuclear lobby was against India and Manmohan Singh at that point of time. Okay, so you're not going to be able to win everybody, but you don't need to win everybody. In Washington is one of those places where you can't win everybody. Because what happens is, if you remember during 71 and before that, the US press used to fawn over India and the administrations used to hate India. Okay, Nixon, I mean, if you read Henry Kissinger's biography, The White House Years, it's a two-part biography. He's like very clear about all of this, how he did not like India, but how the press was, because they were fawning over India, it kind of tied his arms and restricted his freedom of action and things like that. So this is one side to it. But there's something more dangerous emerging here, which is for the first time, US policy consensus is broken, right? And the problem with the breaking of consensus is we see that it's split along party lines. Now, interstate relations need to be party neutral. But in America, you see it is happening with every single policy. It's not just India. It's everything. It's immigration, it's vaccines, it is everything the thing is freeing, which is why 70 Democrats signed that letter against Modi. Not one single Republican did. Right? And sometimes we also don't get it right. So, for example, if you say that Trump gave India a lot, and before that, George Bush Jr. gave India a lot, like the nuclear deal, for example, it's not that Obama didn't try. Because, Ash Carter was a very good defense secretary who did try a lot of things that we finally got under Trump, and finally this a big deal. So, there were two big deals here. The big deal that India wanted to trumpet, which was the jet engine deal, wasn't the great deal because it didn't even fructify properly. It was more of an MOU and things like that. The actual big deal in all of this is that General Atomics Predator drones. Because I've been going into the micro detail of it. I was quite dismissive of it, but I've been going into the details of it. And it is truly something spectacular. The official value of that deal alone is something like about $10 billion. India is paying about 3.5, but it comes to about $10 billion. For the first time, you have an Indian company, two Indian companies, in fact, which are putting equipment on an American drone developed in India here at IIT Delhi, which are world class, and they will be standardized on all American drones. Okay, they will be standardized on all American drones. The entire MRO, that is maintenance, repair, and overhaul of Predator drones in the Asia Pacific, will come to India, right? Which means every drone in the Asia Pacific has to come to India for that is the Predator type drone has to come to India for maintenance and repair. And what is happening is we're also putting an Indian engine into that drone for the first time. A part of that engine is coming from Honeywell, but the actual turboprop is made here in India. So, it is in fact a very, very significant deal. There are other parts of the deal here which I'm discovering about slowly, through my contacts, which I can't really disclose. But when the entirety of that deal is made clear, it is going to be one of the biggest defense export deals that India has actually gotten into, right? So this is the tangibles of it. And I'm always about tangibles. If I don't get tangibles, I always criticize. Because for example, why I keep taking you on, for example, is all I get on your channel is hot air. मेरा पैसा अभी तक तुमने एक फूटी कौड़ी नहीं दिया है, चॉकलेट का भी नहीं दिया है, एक बर्फी भी नहीं दिया है, एक बॉटल शैंपेन
That's
छोड़ो.
because I'm helping you lose weight.
Yeah, sure. That's what she tells herself. But you see, this is like what is that lady, Marie Antoinette, and let them eat cake.
But
But anyway,
having come back from Kerala, I thought you'd become little more, spiritual and non-materialistic. Obviously,
It hasn't worked. No.
no, not really.
Except
Materialism
you
is.
see a new glow in
I'm
your
a
face.
charvak. I'm a charvak. Remember,
Huh?
I thrive on the lived experience.
But we see the
So
glow in your face, Abhijit. That is something noticeable. I'm sure a lot of our viewers are observing that.
that is my tejas, which has always been there. But anyway, this is it's tangibly a good deal. But I worry not because of India. I can't find fault in anything India did. The fault here lies with America. The fracturing of that society poses a lot of dangers for India going into the future, right? And that really is the problem. It's also a great opportunity because there is no time to get close to a superpower than when it's collapsing, so that you become the successor state. ठीक है? For example, like young blondes, they should always marry much older men who have one foot in the grave.
Oh God, now enough. Now we
Or,
don't need you to be talking or speaking for women.
or
And
young
the SS has
or,
given us a very good tip. He's saying, please behave like a grown-up child in front of the guest CJI.
right. So see, he's not just CJI. See, GC. GC is the Indian version of JC. Jesus Christ is Jesus Christ. That's Gautam Chikamani. You can see from his hair, he's like that. See, why he's called GC and not JC is because, Rakhi Sawant couldn't produce Jesus properly. So she said Jesus Christ, and that's how Gautam Chikarmani got his GC. When she saw him, I know it. I was in Bombay when Rakhi Sawant bumped into us when we were at a conference, and she looks at him with his Jesus like hair and says, "Oh, Jesus Christ!" And that's how GC came about.
Okay.
But but okay,
Can she
I
pronounce Jesus Christ? She would say Jesus Christ or something like that. How would she?
we were going for the launch of our Hari Mirchi party for the last election, you see. So anyway, but coming back to the topic, there is something very important in the long-term future going ahead. It is not necessarily pleasant. We should remember that, but it is important. I really don't know how it's going to play out, but I want to focus on Modi here for a minute. In spite of being denied a visa for 10 years, he never personalized that policy.
Yeah.
And, everybody is making fun of him for, being overly warm and overly cordial with the American president. You tell me, who has he not been warm and cordial with? He was warm and cordial with the Papua New Guinean Prime Minister, just as warm and cordial as he is with the American president. Did you find any fault in him, any fault in his hospitality, any fault in his behavior towards any president or prime minister he has ever met? He is equally warm to every one of them. He doesn't discriminate between any one of them, not race, not religion, nothing. So, I find a lot of that criticism. Oh, can you give a married woman a diamond? Oh, what is this huggy duggy thing? Oh, what is with his English? क्यों English बोलने से क्या? Sorry, I've taken an oath that I will be very charitable and speak Satyam Bada Mishtham Bada. So, speaking English is not a measure of your of what you bring to the table. Speaking English is not a measure of your worth. It is really sad. I think it's really sad that this country, the debate is so superficial that there were grammatical errors in his speech, there were slips of the tongue in his speech, etc., etc., etc.
I used to think that was elitism, but now I think it's deep insecurity to
It
be
is, of
talking
course.
like that, and inferiority, to be
Yes.
getting so hung up about an accent. Gautam, to come to you, or GC as we shall now call you, I want to get a perspective from you on the dynamics, the global dynamics of India and America getting closer. How do you think Russia is viewing it? I mean, we can all make a guess about China, but what's curious is Russia, because we have had a long and quite stable relationship and friendship with them. What do you think they're looking at? What were the observations do you think they would have made about this visit and the relationship that is evolving between India and the US?
Um, I think, given the long relationship that we have had with first the Soviet Union and now Russia, particularly around weapons and aircraft, etc., and the recent change that we continue to take their oil despite Western sanctions, should balance out the fact that we are now moving our strategic technologies, or also adding to the our quiver in the armory with US products and technologies and so on, in a far intense way. For instance, the Russia, Abhijit can correct me, I don't think they have transferred any technology to India, any worthwhile technology that is worth transferring. But here we have, as he himself mentioned, and as we all have read, it will be made in India. So there is a transfer of technology already happening. So I don't think Russia needs to fear anything. Plus, the momentum of their past products that we have, particularly in defense, carry those long-term contracts. So I think we will be more than Russia. I think India needs to balance both Russia as well as the US together, and I think under this particular dispensation, it is doing that very well. I don't see why that should change tomorrow. I think it would be suicidal. It will be a complete washout of any leadership or any strategic sense in case the government changes and the dispensation changes and we start rebuking America all over again. And in fact, I don't think that is even possible anymore. The diaspora today is fairly large, I think 1 million people. It's approximate, or 4 million people. Sorry, it's 4 million people. That's about 1% of the American population, which contributes about 6% to their taxes. So, and we have a strong diaspora out there. Many of them are anti-India, but most of them are proud of being Indians, of Indian origins. They may have changed their citizenships, but they continue to. So I don't think an overt shift will happen. So, and I maintain what I've been seeing across governments, across good as well as bad, that this is a work in progress in the longer scheme of things. I think this was inevitable. In fact, the speed at which this is happening, the kind of hype that it has generated, all due to Modi. No doubt about it, and full marks to him. But had this happened, let us say in 1950s, 1960s, had we opened in the 1970s, China wouldn't be what it is today. We allowed China to grow. America ensured that it grew. We continued to suffer, stifle. And we started our journey in 1991, as late as 1991, when China already had a 2-decade lead over us. And I think this, and forgive me for introducing a new animal into this discussion, which is democracy. I think, irrespective of what you think or how perfect or imperfect they are, or how you label or mislabel democracies, democracies are here to stay, and democratic alliances are generally stronger than authoritarian. I don't think a one man, the whim of one man, the chairman of everything in China, for instance, is something worth doing a deal with. I know Elon Musk has gone there and now he's announcing his plans for India. But what happens tomorrow if something's, as the US establishment is de risking, it is no longer decoupling, they call it de risking. And they're very good at inventing new uh, ideas around which you can shape
Right, narratives. Yeah.
the amphitheater of geopolitics. So even as the US establishment wants to de-risk, even as the EU wants to de-risk from China, uh, and suppose they do, what is going to happen to all the investments of American companies or of the West, let us say German firms that are out there? We don't know. That cannot happen in India.
Hmm.
There are institutions, there are democracy, and that is where democracy is not just a 4-letter word that people are spewing with almost everything that they disagree with you. Because it's a democracy, you will always have disagreements. But it is also because of democracy that you get the protections. No company will get the kind of protections that a democracy can give compared to, let us say, a China and any authoritarian regime. So I think the de-risking, which to me is a cover fire for decoupling, at least until the new supply chains are made, which will happen over the next 5 to 7 years, at most a decade, is also a more reassuring factor. In fact, forget India. Let us look at India from America's view, from eyes. Let us not look at ourselves. What do you see when you are sitting in America on the map on the global world map? You see a country that is very well placed strategically. The geography is very well placed. You see a country that's going to be the third largest economy within this decade. You see a country that is sincere in its aspiration to give people a better standard of living. Where is all that going to come from? Governments don't do business. Governments only eat the money. Business does business. Companies do business. At such a point, whom would you put your bet on? If you're standing halfway across the world, where would you put your bet on? Would you put it in some small country? Even let's say Thailand, which is far more, or Vietnam, which is far more open, far more accepting of global capital, and all the corporate refugees from China are first going there. But does it have scale? India has the scale. I think
And the skill,
the only
the
country other
skill, the manpower.
would be Indonesia, in my opinion. But I think that's crossed $1 trillion also, $1 trillion GDP. So I think, taking all these into considerations, I come back, I'm sorry, like a broken record, to my old point, which is the economics is in place, the strategy is getting in, the strategic affairs are getting into place, and I see this as almost an irreversible going forward.
Okay, and also I want to jump in here. You raised a very important point about doing business or having a relationship with authoritarian regimes. When I was, with the Prime Minister's visit coming up, and even during the visit, a lot of these think tankers, of course, politically motivated to a large extent, were speaking about how the values of India and the US don't match, and how we should, look at the values before deepening ties or doing business with India. How come they didn't have that check on them in all the decades that they were doing work with China and doing business with China, knowing fully well what China stood for?
Forget China. You look at West Asian regimes, all kingdoms that oil-producing kingdoms. What happened to all of their values then? Let me turn that question, Advaita ji. The values of India are far more democratic, liberal, and open than America. Which was the country that distributed vaccines to 70 countries after fulfilling its own? And which was the country that demanded vaccines, almost like scratching it out from other countries? Tell me. It was the US which was doing the scratching. It was India which was doing the giving. We have given vaccines to poorer nations, all of whom are incredibly indebted to us. They may forget about it in the next election. But the fact is that India has been is seen to be a positive force under the at least under the current dispensation. India has shown its motives to be absolutely clear. To say, in fact, I would say, yeah, the values don't match. America doesn't measure up.
But Advaita, I don't think we should make too much of these ideological issues. As Gautam said, business does business, and business will go there wherever they see money, and they are pretty agnostic about politics, as long as people give them a safe passage, or some kind of assurance that they can operate there, monopolistic rights or protection, and be able to take their money out. I think that is slightly overstated, and that's why people flock. All company, people from America, from Europe, everybody flocked to China when they thought it was opening up. That was a huge opportunity, or when they had costs. So those things I feel will change, will not change really. Speaking, it will all be the more political issue of, if they're not able to operate there, if they don't feel safe, if there are these clampdowns which have happened on business in recent years in China. I think that is what's going to worry them more. Coming back to Russia, I view it in a very layman's term. I don't worry about the Russia-India relationship. And India has done pretty well in this, through this whole period. Russia, I see, is like an old friend who was very close to you, but now has fallen into some sort of bad times. But they're grateful that you haven't forgotten their favors earlier, and you still consider them to be friend. You have not dumped them and moved forward in life ungratefully. And to a large extent, going a step beyond that, I think the role played by India very deftly during the Ukraine crisis in insulating them. In fact, India did just the reverse of what Russia had done to us during in the Pak War. Constantly stalling those resolutions in UN, continuing to buy oil from them against all pressures and protests. Though I'm sure there were back channel dialogue happening with the US. That's why they allowed us to do that, because to some extent it was also in their interest. If we didn't buy Russian oil, the global prices of oil would have shot up hugely. So all that has been maneuvered pretty well. And I don't think India really needs to worry about taking those positions which people were asking Jaishankar or anybody to take at different fora. Those are more of the journalist Rana Ayub types, who see the world as black and white and say what will happen tomorrow if China attacks you. Are you going to, so those sort of things? I don't think that is really the issue so much. But what we have to ensure them, one is, you've handed out so many things to them, which, as someone said, it will go and create jobs in US. But how do we get them to do stuff on our terms here in the country, which actually contributes to the Indian economy the way we need it, not the way the Americans want it? They also have to realize they have to, just like Modi goes and says there is going to be so many thousands and millions of jobs going to be created in the US due to the defense deal. What are they willing to provide us to reciprocate that gesture? Because we need those jobs much more to that extent. And the way to support Modi or anybody in future would be to support those agenda rather than deals or assuring them of defense cooperation. But last thing, Gautam, what do you think about the defense thing? I think there America will always play opportunistic. It doesn't mean today they're close to us. They're not going to support Pakistan tomorrow or give them another tranche of financial help. They'll continue to do that. But that will be again part of the game of play, not exactly playing one against the other, but we'll also have to take in our stride that they will, it's like play on both sides of the border.
So I think America as a trustworthy partner, that image has fallen. There is no doubt about it. But I think if you just look at it through the prism of interests, India is the play right now. It's likely to continue. There's a point you made about jobs. The deal is one of the deals. Yeah, Air India buying those aircraft will create 1 million jobs in America, American jobs, not jobs in India. So I do think that there is a sense of mutualism here, where their surplus, which is capital coming over here, and our companies buying those products and creating jobs over there, there is a mutualism which goes um, beyond just a simple trade. Also, you mentioned about those critics, etc., like Obama recently and maybe Trudeau earlier. I don't think they matter much at all. They are talking to their domestic constituents. Just as in India, you will have people criticizing Modi the moment he returns from Egypt after 2 days, saying that this was nothing, what did we achieve, etc., etc. They're talking to their domestic constituents. It's a local politics, it's not a global, it's not a country to country, it's not geopolitics, it's not international relations. I think on that front, without being naive, I think we are going on a clear path. And if history is any indication, from 1991 that path has been going. And given my arguments earlier, which is the scale, the size, the intent, it is likely to continue. Of course, I'm not saying that you trust America blindly, no, but and you remain cautious, and that's why the Russian our ties with Russia will continue alongside our increasing and faster, quick ties with the United States.
Hmm. Abhijit, you were listening in. You were not on screen, but you were listening in. You wanted to say something about what GC was saying?
What is this GC business, man? I'm simple Gautam. ये GC क्या है?
He started like he's AIM, your GC. Oh, I thought that was your what you were called. That's the impression AIM gave.
Yeah, yeah.
He's
This is
Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ. Uh, so,
Jesus.
Jesus.
So
Jesus
JC,
has GI,
so not
GI,
JC, but JC.
AI. Sorry. Go ahead,
So, if
Sandeep.
you track all great empires, in their final phases, they become extremely capricious. Our mutual friend Samir Saran, I think, has written a op-ed today where he's compared it to ancient Rome, where Rome was built on hard work and celebrating victory and virtue and things like that. Halfway through its life, it became this sort of decrepit thing where the only thing Roman emperors were capable of doing were orgies. Hmm. The word itself is a Roman word. Today, you have a sort of intellectual thing happening in America, the battle of the pronouns. And what the LGBTQ flag should be, who it should include. Now, autism has been included there, sex workers have been included there. These are the raging debates out there. America's unreliability today is like Rome's unreliability as a partner. Rome would, at the end of its existence, even attack friends. और इसमें क्या हो रहा है? You look at how they've treated Israel. They regime changed Israel. We don't want to talk about it. Israel doesn't talk about it publicly because they're very dependent on their access to excuse me, to American high tech and American politics. But everybody knows that the only reason that Netanyahu was removed from power for that 1 year, where Naftali Bennett and the other Benny Gantz became prime minister, were because of the Democrats specifically playing political games out there. You've seen, if you go to what's our man? I forget his name now, but the American journalist who lives in Brazil who started up The Intercept.
Glenn Greenwald.
Glenn Greenwald, thank you, yes. They actively interfered in the Brazilian elections and saw to it that Lula lost. They actively encouraged and interfered, and they're not even hiding it. Right? And Brazil is a friendly country. What has Brazil ever said or done to America? This was done purely because of a democratic political dislike of Jair Bolsonaro, right? You look across the board, they are, foreign policy is getting politicized. That's a very, very dangerous thing. Saudi Arabia, once their closest friend, you look how they treat MBS because of one man, Jamal Khashoggi. How can foreign policy be based around one man? Just because he's a high society member of the Washington Post editorials, not columnist roster. Foreign policy, a national foreign policy can't revolve around one individual, boss. It just cannot. It violates every principle of foreign policy. So, there is a lot happening in America. This whole thing about shared values, those shared values are getting fewer and fewer and fewer across the board. So, those op-eds went exactly wrong. And it's not that our values are getting any different. Our values, I would actually say that democratic freedoms have expanded. You try saying half the things that are said about Narendra Modi under the Congress government, and you see what the hell happened to you.
Yeah,
People
that's so
forget.
true.
Because it's been almost 10 years, people have forgotten what it was like at that point of time. Okay. Who brought in 66A of the IT Act? It was brought in by that fellow at the Center for Internet Societies or whatever, Pranesh Prakash or whatever. He was the one who sat with Kapil Sibal and wrote that 66A. And he pretends to be a campaigner for free speech. That is why nobody ever calls him anywhere. And that is why he's been blacklisted by everybody. So let's not even go down that path. Notice the one country that America should have actively outraged about, which is China. Gets away at most with one or two bad headlines in the Washington Post and New York Times.
Yeah, but that's sold out also. NYT.
Country locked up 2 million Muslims in concentration camps. Not one US sanction on it. Nobody from the government sanctioned. The CIA didn't even know how to identify who was responsible for it, or they did and they didn't want to impose anything from them. You look at the collapse of law and order in America. Hunter Biden, are you even following? Are any of you even following what has happened with him in the last 2-3 weeks? All the photos that have come out are of him with underage girls.
Their children, actually. Their children.
They're children.
Yeah.
They're not just underage, they're children.
Yeah.
They have located that message from the vice president's office where he's saying, my father is with me, the big gun is with me, why haven't you paid me? When Joe Biden came to office, he said, my first task is going to be that Trump never returns to power. If an Indian prime minister ever said that, that would be a complete scandal. They constituted the current indictment of Trump was done in the old Soviet NKVD style, which is you charge people for crimes that you find. You don't constitute special committees to find crimes that somebody has done. That is a violation of the fundamental principles of law.
Yeah.
They talk about Godi media. You look at how Washington Post, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, all of that treated that huge chemical gas spill outside, what was it, Oregon or Chicago? I don't know. I mean, you know what I'm talking about, the train capsizing and things like that. Kaun Godi media hai?
Ohio. It was Ohio.
None of these, Midwest, correct. None of these ones are even covering. Nobody's even talking about Hunter Biden and the corruption out there. We know for a fact he got money from Burisma, and I mean, it is all out there. It is clear as light and day.
But Abhijit, what do you see them doing, the same group doing for India? As you're saying,
I think they have been, and Gautam, please come in on this as well. this regime change thing is something that we have to take very seriously going into the election, or do you think it's in the realm of conspiracies as far as we are concerned, India is concerned?
A foreign supported regime change in India beyond financing, which also is now being
Backed up.
walled up, is quite difficult. We are not Brazil. We are not Nicaragua. I don't think that is possible. And our politics is way too complex. I mean, what regime change are you going to do in some Diaspora village that is going to vote for whoever they wish to, irrespective of what Washington Post says? I feel we give Washington Post, New York Times too much attention.
We do.
I don't think even the US is giving them that much attention. There is a tiny group of anti-India people, anti-Hindu, if I may be permitted to say so, who are celebrating this and magnifying these with the power of their followers, with the power of their influence, and with the power of some money. But other than that, I mean, if that were true, if Washington Post, what it wrote mattered, if what New York Times wrote mattered, if what BBC shows matters, then I don't think these deals would have happened. I think like I mentioned earlier, again, like a broken record, I think these people are noisemakers. They provide titillation on Twitter. Other than that, the G2G and the B2B, which are the two most important relationships between two countries, two democracies such as the US and India, are on course. They are doing fine. The problems in business would be, okay, it's too bureaucratic. Maybe you need to remove some clauses here and there. We had done a study on imprisonment clauses. There are 26,134 imprisonment clauses at an aggregate that Indian businesses face. We did that report. The government has taken cognizance of that report. There is a bill in Parliament called the Jan Vishwas Bill it was there in February, and I think maybe in the coming monsoon session, or I don't know when, it will get enacted. So India is continuing to reform. So the B2B is only going to get better. Look at our stock markets, among the best performing. So I don't see we are wasting time and just giving too much attention. Yeah, they must be called out, and people like Abhijit are doing a fantastic job of doing that. But to me, they are irrelevant. They are bit players. They revel in their own celebrations, give awards to themselves, celebrate their own
But Gautam,
mediocrities, give
how would you explain?
and they sort of salivate in their own
So,
bullshit.
well, all that is true, Gautam, that they live in echo chambers. They kind of, what they've been doing over the years, what was called the car market gang, etc. But how would you explain, Rahul Gandhi so actively wooing the American, not just the so-called intelligentsia, but also the government, Sam Pitroda making a statement?
I wouldn't want to get into Rahul Gandhi personally, but I think the opposition as a whole is clutching at straws. So whatever it can get, wherever it can poke, and why should the Indian government even get poked? I mean, if he goes to Cambridge and says a couple of things, that's what democracy is all about.
No,
You
not,
listen
but
to him, you
not
counter him.
Cambridge.
Just
And
to
Today,
the point.
Today, Sam Pitroda says he has held several secret meetings with people. He said we did some things in public domain and certain things we have done. Cambridge is a different issue, but here and other political parties are not doing that, which Congress is doing very, very blatantly and on the face.
Well, they also signed that MOU with the Communist Party.
I just need to come on this because this is directly related to what Gautam said. About 5 years ago, I would have agreed with Jesus Christ. But now, see, the problem is when you lack substance, you go on air. You know what Arun Jaitley's famous quote, when you have the facts, bang on the facts. When you don't have facts, then bang on the law. And when you have neither facts nor the law, then you bang on the table. That was how he used to explain to all his young interns on how to behave in court. The problem here is the proof of the point I'm making is Jamal Khashoggi. What was he? He was a completely irrelevant guy who supported Muslim Brotherhood policies. He was just a columnist, nothing more. And yet that one action influenced policy. I can show you, like, the serious policy guys in Washington, they will tell you in private, look, we don't read the Washington Post and we've stopped reading the New York Times because it's just not worth our time anymore. We don't get any information from it. Our CIA and embassy cables contain much better, much higher quality information than that. The problem is, America is a system where institutions are being infiltrated. Remember that. Gender ideology and things like that, DEI training is going into institutions. They are they are politicizing institutions. The kind of crap I hear State Department people say these days, I would not have heard 7, 8, 9 years back. You look at the lady who was in charge of the American embassy here. We've spoken about this. She's an affirmative action case. And the problem is, the new ambassador isn't taking charge. He thinks he's a ek saal ka tourist, because he thinks his term is going to end with the next elections. I don't know what he's thinking, but he's behaving like a complete tourist. He still hasn't taken charge of the embassy. Right? There are big problems out here. The reason I take these people on is because I see how they're slowly impacting policy. And it is not just them. Remember, today in the American government, you are not given government contracts. You are not given access unless you have your diversity, equality, whatever policies in place, unless you are Black Lives Matter certified on certain things, etc., etc., etc. So, the communist institutional capture that happens in other countries is being done by a sort of academic mafia out here, which is very dangerous. So I would disagree with Gautam. Do not turn your back to this. Do not minimize the threat. We minimize the threat of these people at our own risk.
The only point I would like to add here is that I think Abhijit is doing a good job of, calling them out, and we should continue to do that. But I think we need to introspect as well. What I see, and I can substantiate it with evidence from during the CAA, during the farm laws, during several other the recent tax collected at source. Anytime there is a mob in front, this government blinks. I don't see why it needs to do that. If it's a law and order problem, come down. You've been given the monopoly. The state has the monopoly on violence. How can this be even allowed? There is a toolkit within which these players that Abhijit is talking about operate. And I'll send you a link to a very detailed research that I did during that time. But that toolkit aside, why are we bending down to mobs? I don't think we need to do that. There is a constitution. There are laws. It's your job to ensure that there is law and order. I think that is the chink in the armor that the opposition has found and is able to repeatedly. Now look at the wrestlers protest. There was going to be violence. Luckily, that got stopped, but through preemptive action. But I'm saying, suppose preemptives fail, where is the state? How can millions of people be held hostage to a handful of narratives? I don't think that's good. I don't think that's possible. And I think this is where the Narendra Modi government needs to take strong action. To that extent, when the opposition is clutching at straws, if these are the straws, God bless India.
And they're balked also on the economic offenses. I don't think that right now any meaningful action can be taken so close to the elections, because immediately people will talk about political vendetta, how you're trying to, corner the opposition, etc. I think that's again a big opportunity missed by this government. And they allow, as Gautam is saying, a situation to drift and simmer, like Manipur is the latest example. Even government's friends would find it difficult to defend that inaction.
Abhijit, you've been saying this for a while.
It's a very strange case, Sandeep. It's a Christian majority place. Hindus are being killed and Christians are crying victim. I don't know how that works, but somehow it seems to be working.
Why? It started because they did not want ST status being given to the
Yeah.
mighties who are
No, so
willing to
forget
live.
the core argument itself. Let's just talk about violence here.
Yeah,
And those who are inflicting violence are crying victimhood, and we are swallowing it whole. I can't
So,
understand this.
so
But
there's
having
the
said that, let me put my disclaimer. I don't know too much about the intricacies of exactly what's going on. I don't think we are hearing very much from Manipur.
So the biggest, lacuna of this government, as we have said in this show and various other places, is communication. They somehow think no communication is communication, but I don't think how they can continue to repeat this mistake for 9 years now, 10 years,
Let me
over and
modify
over.
that. Let me modify that, Sandeep. I think this government is one of the best communicating governments when it comes to communicating policy, planning things here and there. When it is frontally faced with the street, all communication lines end. They die. For
exactly.
some reason,
There-
they
See,
freeze. They freeze like a camera freeze. Like I freeze in front of the camera. This government freezes in front of violence, threat of violence, mobs, etc. I don't see they don't need to. They're a strong government. They have good people there. And this is just a mystery to me. And this needs to change.
I think it's also a language problem. They're very good at communicating in all the regional languages and in Hindi. The problem, the big lacuna is with English. And the second lacuna, as Gotham identified, was with their acceptance of the state's monopoly on violence. They don't seem to realize that unless the state takes over the monopoly of violence, people will get hurt, people will get killed. This is what Chanakya talks about as Matsya. The job of the ruler is to prevent the big fish from eating the small fish.
I don't know. It could be because of judicial interference as well, and there is a lot of weeping, wailing, victimhood being presented. But I think this is time for the state, which includes the judiciary, to just wake up and smell the
But
coffee.
but
This is not allowed. How can you stop the roads? What
but
rubbish
Jesus
is this?
Maharaj, but Jesus Maharaj, see, there was the case where a certain judge, made certain comments about reservation when in the Rajasthan High Court, and the Congress, which had no majority either in the Lok Sabha or the Rajya Sabha, moved an impeachment motion against him within 5 6 days, and he was forced to apologize. This government doesn't even want to do that. So, at some point
Anyways,
we have
I think we need to come back to the Indo-US. We are getting too deep into the local politics, which I think we should engage with as the next year is the election year. But I think coming back to the Indo-US, I think we are on an even keel. And despite the unreliability of the US for the short to medium term, we are going to go ahead, by which time a momentum is likely to be built both strategically as well as economically. So to me, any change in this is going to be a very major disruption for US itself. The interests are now very strongly aligned. Unless it wants to go back to getting beaten up by China, that's their choice, and good luck to them. But India is where it is, where it was, protecting our interests and articulating them very clearly. I think, in fact, I think India could reform the US with what's going on right now.
So that's a lovely note to end on. And before I do that, I just want to ask Sandeep very quickly. He's the only person I know who's read that Economist article because he was sharing screen grabs of it, where they said something along the lines, at least the headline suggested that. I don't read the Economist, but that the US needs India more.
Which is true today, given the whole situation of the economic situation, their job situation, and everything. They do need India more, but they might try to get India on their terms. If tomorrow they think Rahul Gandhi is going to deliver India to them on a platter, maybe even that works for them. Though I personally believe, as I said, nobody can deliver India like Modi to any of these countries because of the strength he has, and also the political majority and everything else. But that could be true. But I think what Gautam said and Abhijit said about this whole lobbying inside US, I will also not dismiss it totally. And I think even the Modi government would be cognizant of it, and they will be making their moves accordingly over there. Last bit, Advaita, talking about this whole English thing, the trying to lampoon Modi for his English grammar or using teleprompters. I see a pattern in that. I think Congress has now decided to take on Modi on every count, including what they think BJP did to Pappu. The Pappufication of this thing, and they're trying to do that to Modi. I'm not too sure it'll work. But if you see some of the tweets of their spokesperson, Abhijit's friends, everybody, I think that seems to be the brief on which they're working.
Also, I mean, the fact that Modi is the
don't
best
know-
debater
I
in
don't know
politics
who they're
today.
talking to. They seem to be like a 7-year-old kid tweeting, honestly.
These are all your friends whom you wished on birthdays, Abhijit. They're all in the same nursery and kindergarten like you. You people have
Yeah.
all grown up there, and they were all your Raki sisters or whatever.
See, I'm
Rakis.
considered a traitor by them, you see.
Nice.
There's nothing much I can do.
It's the
You know,
Rakis.
we were at caviar and foie gras eating classes together. We were taught how to hold the blini and pop the correct amount of beluga caviar on top, and how to pop it in there in your mouth, and how to apply the foie gras on your brioche and pop it into your mouth, and how to
Was it
sip your
Miss-
champagne.
Miss
But-
Potter's etiquette classes or
Alas, they
something?
don't invite me anymore. Well, they do invite me, but they refuse to take pictures when they invite me. So such is life.
Oh,
Good for you.
are you
Okay.
that disliked by the Congress? That's something to wear like a badge. But
No,
thank you,
I have lots of friends in the Congress, but the more prominent people that you see these days, see, Rahul Gandhi is encouraging a culture of vitriolic personal hatred. And only the people willing to make fools of themselves like that are getting promotions. This isn't the old cultured Congress, huh?
Okay,
So,
we'll
Sunday
discuss
clubbers
it.
can send some applications, I guess. We're pretty good at that also.
We're good at vitriol? I don't think so. But
can.
anyway,
I'm
we
a very
crossed.
well-behaved child, unlike Advaita, who
You
brings
need
out
to
the
see today's viewership, Advaita. Today we were in our soberest best. I don't know whether that's what the old NDTV style of programming, whether your viewers.
Yeah, we went over 1900 live watching us. And I hope they like and share the video because that's a good number. And please do subscribe to the channel as well so that we can continue to bring you content like this with wonderful new guests as well, like Mr. Gautam Chikramani.
Christ.
I hope, I'm not saying that, but I hope you will come back despite the trolling and all of that from the other panelists, not me, but the other panelists, because I did actually go to etiquette school.
Uh-huh. But this must be also a lesson for Suhail Seth, Pallavi Ghosh, and others that their absence doesn't bring down the TRP.
No, because everyone's here for me, obviously.
That's
Have
true.
to
What
figure
did
that
they say? Barkhadat with a heart or a golden heart?
The golden heart. Barkhadat with the
Golden
golden heart.
But I hope you will come back and be with us, Gautam. I hope you enjoyed it. It wasn't as bad as you were
It was
dreading.
nice. Yeah. I'm still quaking with fear, but yeah.
What nonsense. At one point, you took over the show and you were moderating. Let's get back on topic.
Hero.
Thank you.
Everybody like, share, subscribe. You know what to do.
Jai Jesus Ji ki. Jai Jesus Christ ki.